Football cleats come and go. With new tech and wild designs hitting the market every year, most players jump from one to another, chasing the latest and greatest. But there was one player who refused to change, even when the world around him did. While others craved innovation, he found perfection in a pair that nobody else could understand. And here's the wild part, these cleats were discontinued years ago. Adidas doesn't even make them anymore, but this one guy somehow convinced them to keep making just one custom batch for him. So why does this footballer refuse to switch? What makes these cleats so special that only he can use them? And who is this footballer? Let's lace up and get into this crazy story about the boots that rewrote the rules of loyalty in football. Imagine this, a footballer who, in a sport driven by constant change and innovation, refused to conform. While new boots flooded the market, each one boasting cutting-edge tech and game-changing features, one player remained steadfast in his commitment to a pair that had long since been retired from production. His boots were simple, even dated by today's standards. But for him, they were everything. The cleats in question were none other than the Adidas Adipure 11 Pro, first released in 2013. This was not just any football boot. In a world where manufacturers introduced lightweight materials, advanced stud configurations, and carbon fiber plates designed to maximize speed and grip, Adidas defied the trend. The Adipure 11 Pro was, in its own way, a throwback. It had a classic design with minimalist stitching, a soft leather upper, and a sole plate that hadn't been seen in stores since 2014. Toni Kroos' journey with Adidas began in his early days at Bayer Leverkusen, where he wore the iconic Predator boots, a model that had its own legendary status. The Predators were all about power and precision, designed with grooves that promised an unmatched level of control. But when the Adipure line launched in 2008, Kroos found his match. By the time the Adipure 11 Pro was released, he was a key face of the series, wearing it religiously as the years passed, and football technology evolved. From the end of 2013, when the 11 Pro came out, Toni just fell in love with it, said Björkevin Hansen, Adidas global product manager. He kept it even as the industry grew and changed. It was like he knew something the rest of us didn't. Kroos' boots were more than just footwear. They were an extension of him. Footage of him meticulously cleaning them in stadium sinks became a symbol of his commitment, a ritual that was almost poetic in its simplicity. Some called him a craftsman, others called him stubborn, but Kroos' choice spoke volumes. He valued consistency over the flash and hype of new releases. In an age where customization was the norm, with players tweaking their boots to suit their specific needs, Kroos was the anomaly. Modern boots boasted high-tech studs designed for stability, agility, and quick turns, typically conical in shape. But this guy preferred bladed studs, which, in theory, should have been a disadvantage on the modern pitch. Bladed studs were popular in the late 90s and early 2000s, before the shift to conical ones. They provided stability, but not the dynamic grip of conical studs. It was rare for a player today to choose bladed studs, but Toni Kroos loved them. While others opted for boots that promised speed and traction, Kroos was steadfast, his preference rooted in habit and comfort. It was like he was defying football's relentless push toward progress. The 11 Pro is an interesting mix of modern design with hints of classic touches, but it's definitely not your typical heritage boot. Here's the first big change, the leather. Unlike the earlier versions of the Adipure line, which were premium kangaroo leather, the 11 Pro swapped it out for calf leather. And honestly, while the calf leather isn't bad, it's definitely a departure from the luxurious feel of the older models. But here's the catch. The leather doesn't even cover the whole boot. Only certain parts of the shoe are leather, while others are made from synthetic materials. It's a design choice similar to what Adidas did with the leather Adizero models. Now, does this affect how the boots feel on your feet? The answer is kind of. The leather areas are soft and don't require much breaking in, so you're good to go right out of the box. But since only parts of the boot are leather, you lose the soft all-over feeling that traditional boots are known for. Instead, you get a tighter, more modern fit in the midfoot, almost like wearing a speed boot. If you're wondering about comfort, the story gets a bit more nuanced. The inside of the shoe is lined with a silky smooth synthetic suede, which feels amazing against your foot and helps prevent blisters. Plus, the tongue is thick and padded, a nod to the classic Adipure 4, which many players loved. But there's a slight downside. The sole plate, especially in the flex zone under the forefoot, is thinner than the rest of the boot. While this makes the sole plate more flexible, it can lead to some stud pressure when playing on harder surfaces like turf. On natural grass, though, it's a non-issue and the boot feels much more comfortable. Right out of the box, the 11 Pro feels wider on the forefoot, making it a great option for players with broad feet. But the midfoot tells a different story. The synthetic material in this area wraps around your foot snugly, giving you that locked-in feel. It's a departure from the relaxed, roomy fit that older Adipures were known for. So if you're hoping for that traditional boot experience, you might be disappointed. The low-cut heel is another modern twist, but surprisingly, it doesn't cause any slippage, so you can stay secure during play. And when it comes to sizing, these boots fit true to size, so no surprises there. Weight-wise, the 11 Pro comes in at 8.2 ounces, which is definitely on the lighter side for a boot that still has leather elements. But don't let the weight fool you. This isn't a full-blown speed boot. Think of it as a solid, slightly more traditional alternative to the Adi Zero. Compared to heritage boots like the Nike Tiempo Legend or the Puma King, the 11 Pro doesn't feel as classic, but it holds its own as a lightweight option with some heritage-inspired details. Moving on to traction, this is where the 11 Pro borrows heavily from the Adi Zero's design. The stud pattern is almost identical, with the main difference being the shape of the studs. Instead of triangles, you get conical studs, which provide a slightly different feel. The more flexible sole plate enhances this, giving you a better sense of traction underfoot. It's almost like you can feel the ground beneath you more naturally. However, this same flexibility can backfire on turf, where you might experience more stud pressure or even catch your studs on the surface occasionally. Now, about touch, this is where things get a little divisive. If you've worn traditional leather boots before, you're probably used to that soft, consistent feel no matter where the ball makes contact. With the 11 Pro, you get that softness in the leather forefoot, but the synthetic midfoot changes the game. The transition from leather to synthetic is noticeable and can feel a bit inconsistent. For players who prioritize a classic touch, this might be a letdown, but for those who've always been curious about leather speed boots, the 11 Pro delivers an interesting middle ground. When it comes to shooting, the 11 Pro feels solid. The tongue padding gives you a bit of extra power and comfort, while the flexible sole plate lets you plant your feet firmly for accurate strikes. The lower cut heel might feel less locked in compared to some traditional boots, but it's not a deal breaker. Overall, shooting in the 11 Pro is exactly what you'd expect. Consistent and reliable. What made Kroos boots even more special was the fact that Adidas continued making them just for him. The sole plate design he used was unique and had been out of production for years, a relic that Adidas kept alive only for his specific size. When the Adipure 11 Pro was re-released in 2023, it looked like a nod to nostalgia, but it couldn't match Kroos' original pair. The original tooling used for his size, 8.5 US and 9.5 UK, had been destroyed years before. His legacy was immortalized in Kroos' story, but it was clear that his boots were heavier, more clunky, and lacked the water-resistant coatings found in modern models. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that for Kroos, the feel and control of his boots were unmatched. The weight, the texture, the pure connection with the ball, everything was perfect for him. As Kroos took his final bow after Euro 2024, it was more than just the end of a career. It was the end of an era for the Adipure 11 Pro, a boot that had been synonymous with precision, control, and the relentless pursuit of perfection. In a sport where players often chase the newest technology, Kroos had shown that sometimes true greatness is found in sticking with what works. When he walked off the pitch for the last time, the boots that carried him through World Cup and Champions League finals left with him. A simple pair of cleats, worn by one man who had a unique story to tell, left an indelible mark on football. Kroos' decision to stay loyal to the Adipure 11 Pro will forever be remembered as part of his legend, a reminder that in a world obsessed with innovation, there is beauty in simplicity, and sometimes the greatest achievements come not from what you have, but from what you choose to stick with. But before you go, I've got something wild for you. Ever heard of a goalkeeper who defied all the rules and saved goals without using his hands? Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's keep the stories rolling.